The smell of fresh coffee wafted through the house, mixing with the faint scent of the cinnamon sugar cookies I'd just pulled out of the oven. I felt that familiar warmth deep in my chest, the kind that made everything seem right in the world. My family was perfect, or so I thought. I was busy finishing up a few things before dinner when I heard the sound of laughter from the living room. It was light, easy, the kind of laughter you hear when people are comfortable in each other's company. My husband, Mark, and my sister, Mia, were chatting away. I paused for a moment, hearing their voices, feeling the soft vibrations of their connection, as if their bond was thicker than the air itself. It was nothing new. Mark and Mia had always been close. Growing up, we three were inseparable. Mark had been my high school sweetheart, and Mia, my younger sister, had always looked up to me. The three of us had shared so many memories, vacations, holidays, and birthdays. It was a family built on trust, a foundation I thought would never crumble. But as I stood in the kitchen, something in me shifted. There was a quiet murmur to their voices, a note of familiarity between them that I hadn't quite noticed before. It wasn't anything overt, nothing that screamed out, "Something's wrong." But it was the kind of feeling you get when you're suddenly aware of something that had always been there, but you hadn't seen it, like an itch that grows more noticeable the longer you ignore it. I shook off the feeling, turning back to the task at hand. It was a normal evening, dinner with the family, nothing more, nothing less. But as I set the table, the weight of the room's silence pressed on me. I couldn't help but listen more closely, overhearing fragments of their conversation. "I was thinking we could take a trip to the lake this weekend, just the two of us. What do you think?" Mark's voice, calm, relaxed, too relaxed almost. Mia's reply was soft, playful, almost conspiratorial. "I think that sounds like a great idea, especially after everything that's happened." Her laugh followed, soft and familiar. I stopped, my breath catching. The words "just the two of us" echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls, but they didn't make sense. What did she mean? What had happened? Had I missed something? I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard them talk like that, with such ease, as if they shared some secret joke. My heart skipped a beat, but I pushed the thought away. Maybe I was just imagining things. I called out, trying to shake off the discomfort. "Dinner's almost ready, guys. Come on, we'll eat together." Mia was the first to enter the kitchen, her smile as radiant as ever. She was beautiful, everyone said so. Growing up, people always complimented her on her looks, and she'd bat them away with that self-deprecating laugh of hers. But even as a child, Mia had always been the golden girl. The one who effortlessly caught everyone's eye, whether it was with her wit, her charm, or her beauty. I was the opposite, quiet, introspective, more comfortable behind the scenes. I didn't mind it, at least not at first. It didn't matter, because I had Mark. And we had our life together, and Mia had her place in it. Mia leaned in for a hug, her arms tight around me. "It smells amazing in here," she said, pulling back with a wink. "Thanks, you know how much I love cooking. Sit down, dinner's almost ready." She smiled and took her seat, her gaze flicking toward Mark as he entered the room. I noticed it then, the way they exchanged a quick glance, almost imperceptible but definitely there. My stomach churned, but I ignored it. Everything was fine. Everything had always been fine. Dinner was like any other night. Mark's jokes, Mia's laughter, my quiet, steady presence in the background. I filled their plates, served the wine, and we all ate together, just as we had done countless times before. Yet, something lingered in the air, something unspoken. After dinner, as we sat in the living room sipping wine, I excused myself to grab a bottle of water from the kitchen. I had taken just a few steps down the hallway when I heard it. Mia's voice low, almost intimate. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. You know how much I love her. I never wanted to hurt her." I froze, heart hammering in my chest. The words hung in the air, and I didn't know what to do. Was I hearing things? Was this some kind of joke? I needed to know. My legs felt like lead as I slowly turned around the corner to peer into the living room. Mark and Mia were sitting close together on the couch. Too close. They were laughing quietly, but when they saw me, their expressions changed instantly. The air went cold. Mia quickly stood, smoothing her dress awkwardly, while Mark just shifted in his seat, eyes avoiding mine. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the tightness in my throat made it hard to swallow. "Yeah, of course," Mark said quickly, too quickly. "Just talking about old times." But it didn't feel like that. It felt like they were hiding something big, something that had been festering for a long time. And suddenly, I knew that I'd been blind for too long. Old times? I asked, raising an eyebrow. What exactly are you two reminiscing about? Mia smiled nervously, but her eyes flicked away from mine. Just silly stuff, nothing to worry about. But I wasn't buying it, not for a second. Mark's expression softened, and he stood up, walking toward me. Hey, everything's fine, okay? I swear, I think you're just overthinking things. The words felt hollow. I couldn't bring myself to believe him. Everything had been fine until it was. I didn't know it then, but this moment would be the beginning of everything falling apart. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to yell, to scream at them, to demand answers, but something stopped me. Was I being paranoid? Was I just overreacting? I couldn't trust my own thoughts anymore. The evening passed uneventfully after that, but I could barely focus on anything. The house felt too big, too empty, and I felt like I was drowning in this sea of unspoken words between us. I tried to shake off the feeling, but I couldn't. I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something was very, very wrong. It wasn't until the next morning that everything finally came crashing down. I woke up to an empty house. The silence was deafening. I shuffled into the kitchen, still groggy, only to find the note on the counter. My heart dropped when I saw the words written in Mark's familiar handwriting. I'm sorry, I need to be honest with you. I've been in love with Mia for a long time. I'm leaving you. The room spun. The words blurred before my eyes as my chest constricted. The floor felt as if it were disappearing beneath me, and the world turned into a cold, suffocating place. I stood there, frozen, unable to breathe. My head buzzed with disbelief, but the truth was undeniable. Mark was gone, and Mia was with him. They had been in love for so long, and I had never known. My husband, my sister. In that moment, I realized how utterly alone I was. The letter in my hand trembled as I stood there, staring at the words, each one searing into my soul. I couldn't bring myself to fully process it, couldn't absorb the reality of what had just happened. My husband, Mark, my partner for nearly a decade, was gone, and the one person I thought would never betray me, my sister Mia, was with him. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and the weight of that knowledge crushed me, pressing down on me like I was drowning. My mind raced back to the years before the betrayal, to all the little moments I now realized had been the beginning of the end. I had always been the quiet one, the steady presence in the background. While Mia was the life of the party, the one who could light up a room with her smile, I had always preferred staying out of the spotlight. I didn't mind it at first. I was happy with my role, supporting Mark, helping him through his work stress, being there for him when he needed me. I didn't care about attention or accolades. I cared about the love we shared, the life we built together. But the cracks started appearing when Mia came into the picture, though I didn't see them at the time. I had always believed Mia and Mark had a sibling-like relationship. They had been close from the beginning, good friends, really. Mia was often over at our place, especially on weekends. At first, I thought it was sweet, the way they could joke and laugh together. It was a dynamic I never questioned. The line between sibling affection and romantic attraction wasn't something I considered. Why would I? Mia was my sister, and Mark was my husband. I had no reason to suspect anything was amiss. But looking back now, I see it all. The signs were there, buried under layers of denial and complacency. Mark had always been so patient with her, too patient. Mia would sometimes call him late at night, asking for advice on her relationships or her career. Mark would listen for hours, offering advice, his tone soft and caring in a way that went beyond friendship. At first, I chalked it up to him being the helpful type, always willing to lend a hand. But now, I realized that it wasn't just kindness, it was something deeper. Mia had always been the favorite, the golden child. She never had to work as hard to gain attention or love, it seemed to come naturally to her. Our parents, especially Mom, doted on her, always praising her for her beauty, her charisma, her ability to captivate everyone around her. I, on the other hand, was always more reserved. I had my own talents, photography, writing, but I never seemed to get the same recognition. I didn't mind it at first, but over the years, the quiet resentment began to build. Mia, it seemed, could do no wrong. I remember the first time I noticed the way Mark looked at her differently. It was subtle, a fleeting glance, but it stopped me in my tracks. We were all at a family barbecue, laughing and drinking under the sun, when Mia made a joke about some old family story. Mark's eyes lit up, a glimmer of admiration in his expression, one I hadn't seen in years. It was like the world stopped for a moment, and I saw something I hadn't seen before, an admiration for her that I'd never felt for myself. I told myself it was nothing. That Mark was just impressed by her wit, her charm. But as time went on, those little moments piled up, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. When Mia and Mark exchanged glances that lasted just a second too long, I felt a flicker of unease. When Mark would compliment Mia on her looks or her sense of humor, it always felt more like flirtation than anything else. But I brushed it aside, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, they were family. They were supposed to be close. I trusted them both. I remember the first time Mark came to me with a concern about Mia. It was late one night, long after dinner, when he sat me down on the couch, his face tight with worry. He told me Mia had been acting strange, distant. She had confided in him about some relationship troubles, and he was worried she wasn't handling things well. I could tell he cared about her, more than I thought was normal, actually, but I assumed it was just concern. It was, after all, his sister-in-law. He wanted to help her. I didn't see the other layer, the one that was building underneath the surface. I had been in the dark for so long. I convinced myself that everything was fine, that the connection between Mark and Mia was just that, family. That's what I kept telling myself every time I felt that gnawing discomfort. I didn't want to face the truth. I didn't want to admit that the love I thought was so solid could be shattered so easily. But as the years went on, the little cracks grew wider, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. I don't know when it happened, exactly, the moment when I started to feel more like a bystander in my own marriage. Mark had grown distant over the past year, withdrawn in a way that made me wonder if something was wrong. But whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would shrug it off, telling me I was overthinking it. I didn't want to push him. I didn't want to be the needy wife, the one who always worried about things that weren't there. So, I let it slide. I let him keep his secrets, and in turn, I kept mine. I didn't push for answers because I didn't want to know the truth. And Mia, she had been so supportive when I noticed the distance between Mark and me. She was always there to listen, offering comforting words whenever I expressed my concerns. "Don't worry," she'd say, her voice soothing. "Mark loves you. You two are perfect together." I believed her. She was my sister, and she wouldn't lie to me, would she? Why would she? I thought I was just going through a rough patch, that it was something everyone went through. But now, looking back, I see it clearly. Mia had been the one Mark turned to when things got tough. He wasn't confiding in me anymore. He was confiding in her, and I was too blind to see it. I remember the night before everything fell apart. Mark and I had a quiet dinner at home. It was nothing special, just takeout, a bottle of wine, and a movie on the couch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mark was unusually quiet, distracted. Every time I tried to engage him in conversation, he seemed to drift away, his thoughts far off somewhere else. I felt like I was losing him, and it hurt in a way I couldn't articulate. The next morning, when I found the note, everything clicked into place. I understood then why he'd been so distant, why Mia had always been so helpful when I talked about our issues. They had been planning this for a while. They had been plotting their escape long before I knew it, and I had been too naive to see it. As the days passed after Mark's departure, I tried to keep busy. I went through the motions of daily life, pretending I wasn't devastated, pretending I wasn't broken. I told myself I had to be strong, that I couldn't let this destroy me. But every time I walked into a room, I felt his absence like a hole in my chest. The house felt too big, too empty without him. And Mia, she never called, never texted. It was like she had vanished, like she had never existed in my life at all. But then I found the letter Mia had written to Mark. A letter hidden in the back of a drawer, tucked away where no one would find it. Her words were full of longing, full of promises about their future together. She had been planning to leave with him long before I had even suspected anything, and I was left behind, completely alone. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my life, had been a lie. I had been living in a house of cards, one gentle breath away from collapse, and now the cards had fallen and all that was left was the rubble. The days that followed Mark's departure felt like a blur. I moved through them in a daze, as if the world had shifted around me and I was no longer a part of it. I went to work, did the bare minimum of cooking and cleaning, but everything felt empty. The house that had once been our home now felt like a prison, cold, hollow, and devoid of life. I couldn't escape the suffocating silence that followed me everywhere. The sounds that used to bring me comfort, the familiar hum of the refrigerator, the soft tap of my shoes on the hardwood floors, all seemed amplified now, reminding me of how alone I truly was. The note Mark left behind was burned into my memory. His handwriting, so familiar yet so alien now, I could still see the words in my mind. "I'm sorry, I need to be honest with you. I've been in love with Mia for a long time, I'm leaving you." I couldn't stop replaying those words over and over again. Every time I thought I had moved past the shock, the pain would creep in again, twisting my insides like a knife. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, grief, they all collided in me, a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to process. I wanted to scream at Mark, to confront him about the lies, the secrets, everything he had hidden from me. But I couldn't. I couldn't even pick up the phone to call him. How could I? He had already chosen her, my sister, over me. The one person I had trusted with everything. And Mia, God, Mia, I hadn't spoken to her since that night. I hadn't even looked at her social media. I couldn't bear it. The thought of her and Mark together made my stomach turn. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this after everything? We had always been close, at least I thought we were. She was my sister, my best friend, or so I thought. I kept thinking about all the moments we had shared over the years. When we were younger, we'd sneak into each other's rooms to gossip about boys, about our dreams, our fears. I remembered how we'd stay up late, telling each other everything, our bond so strong that it felt unbreakable. But I had been living in a lie. I had no idea that Mia had been hiding something so monumental from me for so long. I thought of the times she'd comforted me when I had doubts about my relationship with Mark, when I had asked her if she thought we were drifting apart. She'd always reassured me, told me not to worry. "Mark loves you, sis. Don't be silly," she'd say, her voice always so confident, so sure, and I had believed her. I had believed her because she was my sister, the one person who could never hurt me. But now I realized she had been the one driving the wedge between us all along. She had been the one fostering doubt in my mind, planting the seeds of suspicion so I wouldn't notice the growing distance between Mark and me. It was her subtle influence, her gentle nudging, that had allowed Mark to slip away from me and into her arms. It wasn't until a week later that I finally gathered the courage to pick up the phone and call Mia. I had gone back and forth, debating whether or not to reach out. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers. Another part of me just wanted to close that chapter of my life and never look back. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know why. I needed to hear it from her own lips. When she answered, her voice was soft, hesitant, as if she was unsure of how to begin. "Hello." "Mia," I said, my voice cracking. I hadn't planned on sounding so broken, but the words just came out that way. "Where are you?" There was a long pause on the other end. "I'm at Mark," she said, her voice almost too quiet. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, as if someone had just punched me in the stomach. I couldn't breathe for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Of course she was at Mark's. Why wouldn't she be? She was living the life I had once shared with him. They were living the life I had built. It felt like a punch to the gut, and I fought to keep my composure. "Are you happy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a stupid question. Of course she was happy. She was with him. The man she had wanted for so long, the man who had chosen her over me. "Mia, how could you?" I choked out the words, the pain of betrayal rising in my throat like a tidal wave. "How could you do this to me?" There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to respond. I could feel her guilt seeping through the phone, thick and suffocating. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you, sis. But I've been in love with him for a long time. I didn't know how to tell you." I felt sick. My hands began to shake as I held the phone to my ear. In love with him for a long time. The words echoed in my mind, repeating like a mantra. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to ask her why, how she could betray me in such a deep, personal way. But I didn't. I couldn't. All I could do was sit there, in stunned silence, listening to her apologies that didn't feel like apologies at all. "I never wanted to hurt you," she continued, her voice cracking. It happened. I never planned for it." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't make excuses, Mia. Don't tell me it just happened. You and Mark were planning this. You were planning to take him from me all along. How long have you two been together?" There was another pause, one that seemed to stretch on forever. I could hear her breathing, slow and uneven, and then, finally, she spoke. "A year," she whispered. "We've been together for a year." "A year?" My stomach twisted, my world spinning out of control. I had been living with a man who had been in love with my sister for an entire year, while I had remained oblivious. I had spent that time believing that everything was fine, that our marriage was secure. I had been so blind, so completely unaware of the betrayal that was brewing beneath the surface. The silence between us felt suffocating. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, processing the enormity of it all. A year. For an entire year, they had both been lying to me, pretending like nothing was wrong. And all the while, I had been living in a fantasy, thinking I still had a family, thinking I still had a future with Mark. "How could you?" I whispered again, the pain too much to bear. "You were supposed to be my sister. You were supposed to be my best friend." "I never wanted to hurt you," she repeated, her voice trembling. "I swear I didn't." But the words were meaningless now. The damage was done. It didn't matter that she didn't want to hurt me. The hurt was already there, and it was deep, deeper than I could have ever imagined. "I need time," I said, my voice cold, distant. "I need space. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I ever will." "I understand," Mia said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, sis. I wish I could take it all back." But I knew she couldn't. None of us could. We couldn't undo the past, couldn't rewrite the story we had all been living. And as much as I wanted to scream at her, to let her know how much she had hurt me, I didn't. I couldn't. The silence between us stretched out, and then I hung up the phone. The air in the room felt thick with tension, as if the weight of what had just been said was still hanging there, unresolved. I sat there, staring at the blank wall in front of me, the phone still pressed against my ear, but no longer connected to anything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from here. My whole life had just been upended, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. But one thing was certain. I was done being the victim. I was done being the person who let others walk all over me. This wasn't just about Mark or Mia anymore. This was about me, about finding my way back from the wreckage they had left behind. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way. The days blurred together after that phone call. I had no idea how to feel. No matter how many times I tried to convince myself that this was all just a bad dream, I woke up each morning to the same emptiness. My mind was full of questions that I couldn't answer. Why? Why Mia? But I didn't have the strength to keep asking them. They were questions that would never be answered in a way that could heal me. I didn't know how to move forward, but I also knew that I couldn't stay stuck in this pit of despair forever. My life had been torn apart, but somehow, I had to find a way to pick up the pieces. At first, I kept to myself. I refused to call anyone, not even my closest friends. They had all known Mark and Mia. They had seen us together, the three of us like some picture-perfect family. But now, how could I face them? How could I look anyone in the eye and tell them that the two people I trusted most had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way? I knew that the sympathy and pity would be there, but I didn't want that. I didn't want anyone's pity. I wanted answers, and more than that, I wanted to feel like I had control over my own life again. I spent hours at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I tried to read to distract myself, but the words on the page blurred together. I kept thinking about how everything had gone so wrong. The betrayal had cut deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just about Mark and Mia anymore. It was about me losing myself in the process. I had been so focused on making my marriage work, on keeping my family together, that I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten that I deserved better than this. A few days after the phone call, I received a message from my mom. It was brief, and it simply read, "Can we talk? I'm worried about you." My heart sank. I hadn't spoken to her since Mark left, and the last thing I wanted to do was talk to her. I couldn't face her, not after everything that had happened. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. She was my mother, and despite everything, I still needed her. So I called her back, half dreading the conversation that was about to unfold. When I arrived at her house later that afternoon, I could barely bring myself to knock on the door. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the weathered wood, before finally lifting my hand and pressing the doorbell. It felt like the longest wait of my life, and when the door finally opened, my mother's face was a mixture of concern and sadness. She pulled me into an embrace, and for a brief moment, I let myself sink into her arms. It was the only place in the world that felt safe, and I allowed myself the release, the brief respite from the storm that was swirling inside me. She led me into the living room and sat me down on the couch. I tried to avoid her gaze, but I knew she could see through me. She always could. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said softly, her voice filled with empathy. "I had no idea what was going on. I should have seen the signs." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, and for a moment I tried to hold them back. But they came anyway, the salty drops spilling over as I buried my face in my hands. I couldn't stop them. I couldn't stop this overwhelming flood of grief that consumed me. I had been so sure, so confident in my marriage, and now it was gone. The life I had built with Mark was shattered, and there was no way to put it back together. "I just don't understand," I managed to choke out between sobs. "How could they do this to me, Mom? How could Mia, of all people, betray me like this?" My mom's face softened, and she reached for my hand. "I don't know, sweetie. I don't know why people do the things they do. But I know one thing, it's not your fault." "It's not my fault," I repeated bitterly. "Then whose fault is it, Mom? Who else is there to blame but me?" She shook her head gently, as if she were trying to calm me, to make sense of the chaos inside my mind. "It's not about blame, honey. It's about what you do with this. You have the power to decide how this story ends." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never really thought about it that way. I had been so consumed with the pain, with the injustice of it all, that I had forgotten that I still had a say in my own life. I still had the power to move forward. I didn't have to let Mark and Mia's actions define me. "But I don't even know where to begin," I whispered, wiping my tears away. "I feel like I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," she said, her voice firm now. "You still have yourself, and that's the most important thing." The silence that followed felt heavy, but not in a suffocating way. It felt like the first breath I had taken in days, like a glimmer of light in the darkness. I didn't have to figure everything out all at once. I could take it one step at a time, but I had to start somewhere. "Have you spoken to Mia?" my mom asked gently, breaking the silence. "No," I replied quickly, my chest tightening. "I haven't talked to her since the day Mark left. I don't think I can. I don't know what to say to her." "I understand," my mom said softly. "But you have to understand that this affects you too. You can't heal if you keep running from the truth. You don't have to forgive her right away, but you can't keep avoiding her either." The thought of confronting Mia again made my stomach churn. I didn't want to see her face, didn't want to hear her excuses or her explanations. But my mom was right. I couldn't keep avoiding her forever. This wasn't just about Mark leaving me, it was about the betrayal that had come from someone I loved like family. Mia had broken something inside me, and I needed to confront that, no matter how much it hurt. I spent the next few days in a kind of numb fog, not really processing anything. I went through the motions of life, did what I had to do, but inside, I was empty. I wasn't sure if I was waiting for something to change, or if I was just hopping to wake up from this nightmare. Then one afternoon, as I sat on the couch in the house I used to share with Mark, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively knew who it was. I had been expecting this moment, though I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But I had no choice. I had to face her. I had to face the woman who had taken everything from me. I opened the door, and there she stood, my sister, looking as beautiful and composed as ever. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I saw the guilt there, the same guilt that had been present in her voice during our phone conversation. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting for me to speak. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. The pain was too much, but I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't let it fester anymore. "Why?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why, Mia? How could you do this?" Her expression faltered, and she stepped forward, her voice shaking. "I never meant to hurt you, I swear. I thought I was doing the right thing." "The right thing?" I repeated bitterly. "You thought betraying me was the right thing." "I didn't want to fall in love with him," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I did, and I couldn't hide it anymore." I shook my head, the pain of it all threatening to drown me. "You should have come to me. You should have told me what was going on. But you didn't. You kept it from me." "I know," she whispered, stepping closer. "I know, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did." We stood there in the doorway, two sisters on opposite sides of a chasm, neither knowing how to bridge the gap. I didn't know what to say, what to do. But one thing was clear. I couldn't move forward until I dealt with this. I had to find a way to heal, to reclaim the life I had lost. Mia, I said, my voice trembling. I need time, I need space. I don't know what this looks like yet, but I can't just forgive you right now. I can't just forget what you did. She nodded, her eyes filled with remorse. I understand. I'll give you whatever time you need. I hope one day you can forgive me. I didn't know if I could. Not yet, but I wasn't closing the door forever. Not yet. As I watched her walk away, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I didn't know how long it would take or what it would look like, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. The road ahead would be hard, but I would take it one step at a time. And somehow, I would find a way to heal. I woke up the next morning with a heavy heart, the weight of everything that had happened still pressing on me like a thick fog. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't escape. It felt like I was suffocating under the layers of anger, grief, and confusion. My body ached with exhaustion, but no matter how hard I tried, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, Mia's smile, and the betrayal that had shattered everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. The conversation with Mia still echoed in my mind, lingering like a shadow. I had expected her to beg for forgiveness, to show the kind of remorse that might make this all feel like it was worth salvaging. But that wasn't what happened. She had apologized, sure, but it felt distant, as if the words were rehearsed, meant to appease me, not heal the wound she had caused. I didn't know what I wanted from her. Maybe I wanted her to explain herself, to give me a reason that would make me feel less betrayed. But I wasn't sure there was any reason that could make this okay. I spent the day in a haze, numb to everything around me. I couldn't focus on work, and when I tried to distract myself with mindless chores, my hands seemed to move on their own, robotic, without any real intention. I tried to eat, but the food tasted bland, unsatisfying. The silence of the house, the emptiness that Mark and Mia had left behind, was unbearable. I had been living in this house for so long, but now it felt like a foreign place, like I didn't belong here anymore. It was no longer our home. It was my home now, and I was struggling to make sense of what that meant. As the hours passed, I found myself staring at the phone on the kitchen counter, my fingers itching to reach for it. I hadn't spoken to Mark since he left, and the idea of confronting him again filled me with dread. What could I even say? The anger that had been simmering inside me had reached a boiling point, and I didn't know if I could keep it contained. I had to know why he had done this, why he had chosen Mia, of all people, over me. But even as I reached for the phone, I stopped myself. Deep down, I knew this wasn't something I was ready to deal with. Not yet. My mind was still too clouded with emotion, and I couldn't risk saying something I'd regret. I had spent years in a relationship with him, years thinking we were building something solid, something unbreakable. And yet, in an instant, it had all crumbled. The trust I had placed in him was gone, and I didn't know how to rebuild it, even if I wanted to. The ringing of the doorbell pulled me out of my thoughts, and I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of who it could be. It was too early for a delivery, too late for a neighbor to be stopping by. I hesitated for a moment, my heart beating a little faster, before walking cautiously to the door. As I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. There stood my mother, her face etched with concern. She wasn't just here for a casual visit, I could tell she had come for a reason. The heaviness in her expression matched the weight in my chest. "Can I come in?" she asked softly, her voice gentle. I stepped aside to let her in, and she immediately wrapped me in a warm embrace. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Her touch, the comfort of her presence, was what I needed in that moment. I felt my body relax against her, allowing myself a brief moment of vulnerability I hadn't let myself experience in days. After a few moments, she pulled back, looking at me with those eyes full of concern and motherly love. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know, Mom. Some days feel better than others, but I can't stop thinking about everything. The betrayal, what happened, and I feel like I can't breathe." She nodded, understanding more than I could express. "I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through. It's not just the betrayal, it's the loss of trust, the loss of what you thought your family was. And I know you're feeling alone, like you've been abandoned by the people you love the most." I nodded, tears threatening to spill over again. I didn't want to cry. I had cried too much already, but the pain felt so raw, so fresh, it was impossible to stop. My mom sat down beside me, her hand on my shoulder, offering me the comfort I so desperately needed. "I don't know how to fix this," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can fix this." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Sweetheart, I'm not going to tell you that everything will be okay, because I know that's not what you need to hear. What I will tell you is that healing takes time. You don't have to fix everything right away. You don't even have to fix it at all if you don't want to. But you do need to give yourself the space to feel what you're feeling. It's okay to be angry, to be hurt, to be lost. You have every right to feel those things." I took a deep breath, letting her words settle into me. It felt strange to hear them. I had spent so much time trying to hold it all together, trying to make sense of what had happened. I had been so focused on finding a solution, on trying to move forward, that I had forgotten how to just feel. How to process the pain without rushing to fix it. "I don't know if I can forgive them," I said quietly, almost to myself. "You don't have to forgive them right now," my mom replied softly. "Forgiveness doesn't come on a timeline. It comes when you're ready. And if that's never, then that's okay too. But you need to focus on you right now, on healing. That's the most important thing." I nodded, her words sinking in. I didn't have to forgive Mia and Mark for their betrayal just yet. Maybe I never would, but I didn't have to decide that now. I needed to focus on myself, on rebuilding the life that had been torn apart. As I sat there, the weight of the conversation with my mother still fresh in my mind, I realized that I had been so caught up in the hurt and the anger that I had forgotten something important. I am not defined by what happened to me. I had always prided myself on being independent, on standing strong even when life got tough. I had built a life with Mark, but I wasn't just Mark's wife. I was me. And while it felt like the rug had been ripped out from under me, I still had the strength to stand. I still had the strength to rebuild. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the future. I didn't know what it would look like, and I certainly didn't have all the answers. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to let Mark and Mia's actions define the rest of my life. I wasn't going to let them steal my peace, my happiness, or my sense of self. I would figure this out, one step at a time. The next morning, I woke up with a different mindset. It wasn't an immediate shift. There was no magical moment where everything suddenly made sense, but it was the beginning of something new. Something inside me had changed. I knew I had a long road ahead. There would be days when the pain would be unbearable, when the anger would resurface, and when I would doubt my own ability to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I believed that I could heal. I believed that, despite everything that had happened, I could find my way back to myself. I didn't need Mark or Mia to validate me. I didn't need their forgiveness to move forward. I was enough on my own, and I was going to prove that to myself. No matter how long it took, I was going to rebuild the life I deserved. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to forgive. But that was a decision I didn't need to make today. Today, I needed to focus on me. And that, for now, was enough. The days following my conversation with my mom were a strange kind of quiet. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe a sudden rush of clarity or a shift in perspective, but that didn't come. What came was something more gradual, a slow realization that I was going to have to live with the pain for a while. It wasn't going to disappear overnight, no matter how much I wanted it to. I couldn't wish it away. But somewhere beneath the hurt, there was this faint spark of determination that started to grow. I wasn't going to let my life be defined by their choices. I wasn't going to let the wreckage of their betrayal take everything from me. I hadn't spoken to Mia or Mark in days. The thought of seeing either of them made my stomach tight. I knew I had to eventually confront them, to figure out how to move forward, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wasn't sure I would ever be ready. The space between us had grown so wide, so deep, that I didn't know if anything could close the gap. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through the bills, my phone buzzed on the counter. The name that flashed across the screen made my heart drop. It was Mark. I stared at the phone, frozen for a moment, my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and I didn't know what to expect. He had never reached out after he left, not once. Not to check on me, not to apologize. He had just disappeared. And now, here he was calling like everything was fine. Like he hadn't torn my world apart. I stared at the phone for a few moments longer, unsure of what to do. I should have let it go to voicemail. I knew that. I wasn't ready for a conversation with him. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, to hear the lies he was going to tell me. But somehow, my hand reached for the phone, and before I could talk myself out of it, I answered. Hello, my voice sounded almost foreign to me, distant, detached. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then his voice, soft, tentative. Hey, it's me, Mark. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What do you want? My words were sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. The anger I had buried deep inside surged to the surface. I just wanted to check on you, to see how you're doing. He sounded hesitant, unsure, like he wasn't sure how to even approach me after everything that had happened. How am I doing? I repeated, my voice hollow. How do you think I'm doing, Mark? You left me. You left me for my sister. What did you think was going to happen? That I'd be fine with it? I never meant for things to get this complicated, he said, his voice laced with regret. I didn't want to hurt you. You have to believe that. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, Mark, I don't believe you. You didn't want to hurt me. Then why did you do it? Why did you betray me like that? Why didn't you tell me the truth? There was another long pause, and I could feel the tension in the air, the distance between us growing even wider. I don't know why it happened the way it did. It just did. I let out a frustrated sigh. You can't just, I don't know your way out of this, Mark. You made a choice. You made a choice to leave me. You made a choice to be with Mia. And now you're calling me like we can just go back to the way things were. Well, we can't. I know, okay? I don't expect you to forgive me, not now, not ever. But I had to reach out. I can't just. Can't just what? I cut him off, my voice trembling now. You can't just walk away from everything we built and then come back like nothing's wrong, like you didn't destroy my life. I heard him sigh, and for the first time in our conversation, I could hear the weight of what he had done in his voice. I don't know what to say, I'm sorry. The apology felt like a bandage on a wound that needed stitches. It was too little, too late. The words didn't matter anymore. They couldn't fix what was broken between us. I don't want to talk to you right now, I said, my voice softer but firm. I need time to think. I can't have you in my life like this. Not until I figure out what I want. There was silence on the other end of the line. I knew he didn't know what to say. Hell, I didn't know what to say either. The words I needed to hear from him weren't the ones he was capable of giving. And that was the hardest part to accept. Mark wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't the man who would fight for me, fight for our marriage. He wasn't the person who would put me first. He had chosen Mia. And in doing so, he had chosen to walk away from everything we had built. I understand, he said finally. I just wanted to let you know that I'm sorry. The line went silent again. For a moment, neither of us said anything. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he added, I'll always care about you. The words hit me like a slap in the face. He'll always care about me. He had already moved on. He was with Mia, starting a new life, and I was supposed to be okay with that. I was supposed to accept that he would always care about me, even though he had chosen her over me. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Goodbye, Mark, I said, my voice steady now, more in control. I didn't wait for a response. I just ended the call, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. I wasn't going to let him back into my life. Not like this. Not after everything he had done. I put the phone down, taking a moment to let the silence wash over me. My chest ached, but the anger that had been building inside me slowly began to settle. I wasn't sure if I was angry with him anymore. Part of me still was, of course, but the anger was no longer consuming me. It was a cold, distant kind of anger, the kind that was slowly fading into the background as I tried to move forward. I had spent too long being consumed by my feelings for him, by the life we used to have. But that life was gone. It wasn't coming back. I had to stop looking backward and start looking forward. I couldn't keep holding on to a past that was no longer mine. It was time to rebuild, time to find my own path again. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was okay, not yet, but I was getting there. I had taken a step. It wasn't a giant leap, but it was progress. I had made the choice to put myself first, to stop letting Mark and Mia control my emotions, my life. It was the first time in weeks that I felt like I had some control over my own future. I didn't know what that future would look like. I didn't know if I could ever forgive Mark or Mia. I didn't know if I would ever be able to trust again. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the strength to face whatever came next. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one writing it now, and that made all the difference. The phone remained silent for the rest of the evening, and I let it stay that way. No more calls from Mark, no more apologies that couldn't fix anything, just silence. And in that silence, I began to hear the sound of my own voice, stronger, steadier than before. And that was all I needed to move forward. The days blurred into weeks, and I found myself slowly stepping back into the rhythm of life. It wasn't easy, nothing about this process was easy. But somehow, I had learned to move with the flow instead of against it. Each day felt like a battle, but each victory, no matter how small, kept me moving forward. I had made the decision to stop living in the past. I couldn't afford to keep dwelling on the life Mark and Mia had taken from me. It was hard, so hard, but I couldn't keep carrying that weight. I had to let it go, for my own sake. It wasn't that I had forgiven them, not by a long shot. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready for, or maybe it wasn't something I would ever be able to give. But I had made peace with the fact that I was no longer the person I used to be. I had to learn to let go of the resentment, of the anger that had consumed me for so long. I didn't have to forgive, but I did have to heal. I spent a lot of time alone during those first few weeks. At first, it was a relief. The silence was comforting. It gave me room to think, to process what had happened, to figure out who I was without Mark or Mia in my life. I rediscovered parts of myself I had lost along the way, my love of painting, something I hadn't done in years, my love for books, for long walks in the park. I found joy in the simple things again, in the things I had neglected while wrapped up in the lies of the past. But there were moments in the quiet when the pain would sneak up on me. It would hit like a wave, and I would find myself choking on the hurt, the betrayal. I still remembered the way Mark used to look at me, the way his hand would find mine in the dark, how we would laugh together over silly things. Those memories still haunted me, but I knew I had to face them head-on. I couldn't outrun them. I started seeing a therapist. It was something I had put off for a long time, but now it felt like the right time. I had to learn how to process the anger and the sadness, how to stop it from defining me. I couldn't live the rest of my life with this weight on my shoulders. The first few sessions were uncomfortable. I wasn't used to talking about my feelings, to laying myself bare in front of a stranger. But little by little, I started to understand the patterns in my life, the choices I had made that led me to this point. I understood now that my relationship with Mark hadn't been as perfect as I had thought. I had been so focused on keeping the peace, on keeping everything together, that I had ignored the cracks in the foundation. But more than that, I learned about myself, about why I had tolerated so much. I realized that I had been afraid to disappoint others, afraid to rock the boat. I had sacrificed my own happiness for the sake of my marriage, for the sake of keeping up appearances. But that was no longer my life. I couldn't keep living for everyone else. I had to start living for me. A month passed before I finally decided to go back to work. The first day was terrifying. I had barely left the house since Mark had left, and the thought of seeing my colleagues, of pretending everything was okay, made me want to crawl back into bed and hide. But I couldn't do that. I had to take the first step toward reclaiming my life, and that meant facing the world again. When I arrived at the office, I was surprised by how normal it felt. The familiar buzz of conversations, the smell of coffee, the soft click of keyboards, it was all just as I had left it, but everything felt different. I felt different. I was greeted with kindness from my coworkers, but there was an underlying tension, like they all knew what had happened but didn't know how to talk about it. It was awkward at first. I didn't know how to explain what I had been through, and I didn't want to. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. This was my journey, not theirs. But as the days went by, I began to feel like I was settling back into my role, into my life. One day, I walked into the break room to find a bouquet of flowers waiting for me. There was a small card attached that read, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through. You're stronger than you know." It was from one of my colleagues, a woman I had worked with for years but never been particularly close to. Her gesture, though simple, felt like a lifeline. It was a reminder that there were still good people in the world, people who cared, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. I kept the flowers on my desk for the next few days, their vibrant colors a reminder that life, in all its messiness, could still bring beauty. It wasn't just about healing from betrayal, it was about finding moments of joy in the midst of pain. Around the same time, I began to notice a shift in how I viewed my family. I hadn't seen my parents in weeks, and every time I thought about reaching out to them, something held me back. I wasn't ready to forgive them for enabling the situation, for not seeing the signs. But slowly, I began to understand that holding on to my anger toward them was only hurting me. They weren't perfect. None of us were. They had made mistakes, but so had I. I called my mom one evening, and we talked for the first time in a long while. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, apologies, and moments of awkward silence, but there was also healing. She told me how sorry she was for not being there when I needed her, for not seeing the signs of what Mark and Mia had been doing. She didn't make excuses. She just acknowledged that she had failed me, and that meant more than I expected. We talked for over an hour, catching up on everything that had happened since Mark left. She told me how much she missed me, how worried she was, and how proud she was of how I was handling everything. I listened, taking in her words, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of the past start to lift. That night, I sat on my couch, reflecting on everything that had changed. I had come a long way from the woman who had stood in the kitchen that day, shattered and broken. I had been lost in my grief, unable to see past the devastation, but now I could see the path forward. It was hard. It was still raw, but it was mine. I had started therapy, had begun finding my footing in the world again, and was reconnecting with people I had pushed away. Most importantly, I had begun to reclaim my life. I had made the choice to heal, to take control of my own happiness, and that was a choice no one could take away from me. I still didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive Mark and Mia. I didn't know if I would ever be able to trust someone the way I had trusted them. But I knew this. I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let their choices hold me back from the life I deserved. I had a scar now, one that would always be with me. But I had learned something valuable. Scars didn't have to be a reminder of pain. They could be a reminder of survival, of strength. And if I could survive this, if I could make it through the worst of what life had thrown at me, then I could face anything. As I looked out the window, the sun dipping below the horizon, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to live my life on my terms, with or without anyone's approval. This was my story now, and it wasn't over yet.